Vancouver, British Columbia. Early summer, 1989. A boy kicks a ball into the yard of an abandoned house on Richmond's Blundell Road. As he retrieves it, something stops him cold. Lying in the weeds is a woman's body. Her hands and feet are tied behind her back, bound tightly with black nylon stockings. Another stocking is wrapped around her neck like a noose. She is fully dressed. Her shoes are missing, and she is dead. The police arrive quickly. The woman is identified as 44-year-old Cindy James, a nurse and counselor who had been missing for 2 weeks. The state of her body is shocking enough, but the coroner's report deepens the mystery. Cindy's system is loaded with an extraordinary amount of drugs, morphine and Valium, 10 times the lethal dose. The strangest detail of all, the authorities rule her death a suicide. Suicide. A woman, hogtied in the yard of an abandoned house, dead from a lethal mix of drugs. From the moment that verdict is announced, the story of Cindy James becomes one of the most chilling and confusing true crime cases in Canadian history. A case that has divided investigators, haunted her family, and puzzled the public for more than 3 decades. But to understand how Cindy James ended up in that yard, we need to go back. Back through years of police reports, strange phone calls, disturbing letters, and repeated attacks. Back to a woman who, for 7 years, lived in a world of terror, whether real or imagined. Cindy James was born in 1944, into what looked from the outside like a stable family. She wasn't abused, neglected, or abandoned. But what she lacked, according to nearly everyone who knew her, was the warmth and emotional safety most children crave. Cindy grew up without the deep, reassuring bond to her parents that anchors a child. She wasn't mistreated, but she wasn't nurtured either. And this absence left a mark. Throughout her life, Cindy would search for that comfort in others. She was bright, pretty, and eager to please. She studied nursing, and by the 1960s, she had moved with her family away from Canada to attend university. It was during these years that the first cracks appeared in her otherwise polished facade. Cindy began writing home about a mysterious man she had met, a medical student. Brilliant, handsome, the perfect match. She told her parents she was in love, deeply committed, and eventually engaged. But she never shared his name. She never brought him home, and no one ever met him. Then the story darkened. Cindy wrote that this fiancé had been diagnosed with a terminal illness, a cruel twist of fate. She vowed to stay by his side until the end. Months later, she delivered the devastating news. Her beloved had taken his own life, choosing suicide to spare Cindy the burden of caring for him and to leave her with unblemished memories. The grief was overwhelming. Cindy was inconsolable. And yet, there was no record of this man's existence. No medical student, no obituary, no death certificate. It was, as far as anyone could tell, a fiction, a carefully constructed lie, told by a young woman desperate for sympathy, attention, and love. This strange episode was an early warning, a foreshadowing of the bizarre events to come. But at the time, Cindy put it behind her. She built a career as a respected nurse and eventually married a wealthy psychiatrist, Dr. Roy Makepeace. He was 18 years older, sophisticated and powerful. The marriage lasted 16 years. But behind closed doors, Cindy claimed Roy was emotionally and physically abusive. Friends said her stories about him changed depending on the day, and Cindy herself seemed unsure whether to portray him as a villain or as a source of support. Even after their divorce, she kept him in her life. Roy, for his part, always denied abusing her. By 1982, Cindy was living alone in a quiet Vancouver neighborhood. And that's when the real nightmare began. It started small. A phone call late at night, a pause. Then the line going dead. Another call, heavy breathing. A whisper of her name, notes left on her doorstep, crude and threatening, rocks hurled through her windows. She called the police, frightened and desperate for help. At first, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police responded seriously. They opened files, logged incidents, and began surveillance. But what they encountered over the next 7 years would test the patience of even the most diligent investigators. The calls escalated. Cindy said the voice on the other end would describe violent fantasies. Sometimes the caller would breathe heavily or masturbate audibly before hanging up. She reported footsteps outside her windows at night. She told police someone had slashed her pillows while she slept, cut the wires on her lamps, killed her pets. Her garden was torn apart. Notes appeared, pieced together with magazine letters, threatening her life. And then came the attacks. Cindy's friends began to find her in terrifying states. One evening, she was discovered slumped against a car, a black nylon stocking pulled tight around her throat, her face blue from lack of oxygen. Another time, a visitor found her lying unconscious in her basement, her arms bound tightly with cord. Cindy told police she had been attacked by 2 men, one who pushed her inside when she opened the door and another waiting in the garage. She claimed they injected her with drugs and left her to die. But medical tests showed no needle marks, and the sedatives in her system, they could just as easily have been swallowed. Police grew suspicious. They began to suspect that Cindy James was staging her own attacks. And yet, some incidents were harder to explain. On one occasion, investigators responding to her home found her dog strangled with a cord, tied up but alive. On another, neighbors claimed to see a strange man lingering near her property, watching her house. Tenants who lived in her basement apartment reported hearing heavy footsteps upstairs when they believed Cindy wasn't home. The RCMP were caught between 2 possibilities, each as unsettling as the other. Either Cindy James was the victim of one of the most elusive, cunning stalkers in history, a man who managed to torment her for years without ever being caught. Or Cindy was creating the terror herself, faking attacks and staging crime scenes for attention. They tried everything. They tapped her phone. For weeks, they stationed officers outside her home in unmarked cars. But during these surveillance periods, nothing ever happened. No calls, no break-ins, no attacks. And the moment the police withdrew, the harassment returned. The pattern repeated so often that many officers became convinced Cindy was doing it to herself. But not everyone agreed. Some of Cindy's friends stood by her, insisting she could not possibly have tied herself up in the complicated knots they found her in. Others noted that the terror only seemed to stop when Cindy was with certain people. An RCMP officer who briefly dated her claimed that during the time he lived with her, the harassment ceased entirely. But when Cindy asked him to move out, the incident started again, worse than ever. Cindy herself seemed torn. Sometimes she insisted she had no idea who was stalking her. Other times, she claimed she knew exactly who it was, but refused to tell police, saying she feared for her family's safety. Years later, under pressure, she finally hinted that she suspected her ex-husband, Dr. Makepeace. But this was inconsistent with earlier claims and difficult to reconcile with his alibis. Her behavior only deepened the mystery. She confided to therapists that she sometimes lied to the police. She admitted to friends that she feared she was losing her mind. But then, the very next day, she would insist she was being hunted by a ruthless predator determined to kill her. By 1988, Cindy's life had become unbearable. She was in and out of therapy. She attempted suicide multiple times. She was hospitalized for depression. Her friends and family pleaded with her to be honest. Was she staging the attacks? Cindy always denied it. And then, in May 1989, Cindy vanished. Her car was found in the parking lot of a shopping mall. Inside were groceries wrapped and neatly stacked in the back seat. There was blood on the driver's side door. And under the car, the contents of her wallet scattered on the ground. It looked like an abduction. 2 weeks later, her body was discovered in the yard of the abandoned house, tied up, strangled, and full of lethal drugs. The coroner's inquest lasted days. Experts testified about the drugs in her system, morphine and Valium, enough to kill her 10 times over. They testified that she would have been unconscious within minutes of swallowing the pills, which raised the most disturbing question of all. How could she have ingested the drugs, walked to the abandoned house, tied herself up so elaborately, and died there, all in the space of a few minutes? Some said it was impossible. Others argued that Cindy, as a nurse, may have built a tolerance to these medications, that she may have practiced tying herself up, just as she had been found tied many times before, that she could have staged the scene and taken the drugs last, just before slipping into unconsciousness. In the end, the jury was divided. Officially, Cindy's death was ruled not determined. Not murder, not suicide. Something in between. To this day, the Cindy James case splits opinion. If you believe she was murdered, then you must also believe that her killer was one of the most competent, patient, and invisible predators in history. A man who stalked a woman for 7 years, invaded her home repeatedly, attacked her in secret, left her alive but traumatized, and never once left behind evidence, never once slipped up, never once revealed himself to another living soul. And then, at last, executed her with a combination of drugs and a staged suicide scene. Or you believe Cindy James was her own tormentor, that she was a woman haunted by deep psychological wounds, so desperate for care and attention that she created a phantom enemy, that she tied herself up, wrote herself threatening notes, injected or ingested drugs, and invented years of escalating torment. And that finally she went too far, taking one last fatal dose, staging her final performance, and dying alone in an empty yard. Neither answer is comfortable. Both are tragic. In the years since her death, Cindy James has become something more than a woman. She is a legend in the world of true crime, a cautionary tale, a symbol of how fragile the line is between victimhood and self-destruction. Was she a hunted woman, gaslit and dismissed by police who didn't take her seriously? A casualty of systemic disbelief, punished for being female, for being frightened, for being inconvenient? Or was she a tragic figure battling inner demons, slowly unraveling in front of everyone's eyes, orchestrating her own nightmare in the desperate hope of being saved? We may never know. But one truth cuts through the haze. Cindy James died twice. Once, across 7 long years of terror, whether real or imagined, as her life disintegrated into a blur of police reports, suicide attempts, and staged attacks. And again in June 1989, when her body was found in the weeds, hogtied, overdosed, silenced forever.